Okay, we're not going live. As people start joining. No, I see them. Okay, we're not going live. Stop sharing. Just a minute. Just a minute, guys. No, I see them. Okay, good. Loki, over to you.
All right, thank you. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I do believe we're giving our attendees a bit of time to join us before we kick off. So we're here on the call with Nick Tikhonov. Hey, Nick.
Hey, how's it going? Great to be here.
Great, excited to have you on board. So like I said, we're just going to give a few of our attendees a bit more time to join us. So about 5 minutes and then we kick off. So thank you. All right. Great. I think we're in good time. We've got a couple of people with us, a couple of attendees with us, and I think a couple more should be joining as we move along. So once again, welcome everyone to today's session. Excited to have you here with us. And before I sort of jump in on the introduction to our guest speaker today, I just wanted to do a bit of housekeeping and just say that today's session is being streamed to YouTube, where it will be recorded and can be viewed later. So in case you miss out on the live session, the live Zoom webinar, you can catch the session there. And together with that, I just wanted to say for the attendees with us here today, in case of any questions or comments you may have, kindly make use of the Q&A feature and post your questions there, and we'll be happy to go through them towards the end of the talk, right? So don't be shy. Feel free to kind of just post your questions there, and we will do our best. Me and Nick will do our best to go through them and get them answered for you. So so that's now that is out of the way. So happy to kind of jump in, and do the intro. So welcome everyone to today's Inquisitive webinar, right? So Inquisitive is a live discussion series that brings together leading lights in the tech space to discuss all aspects digital, right? So we've been at this, I think for about a couple of months, I think less than a year, but you know, it's been quite the exciting journey, having amazing speakers come through. And in today's webinar, we are privileged and excited to have with us Nick Tikhonov, who is co-founder and CEO of Little Atlas. So a bit of a background about Nick. Nick is obsessed with products that bring people joy. And he's been at this for over a decade, right? So, building software and doing product management with experience working with companies like Improbable, GitHub, and Amazon. So before sort of fully dedicating his life to Web3 and diving in into Web3 and starting Little Atlas, Nick spent about 2 years developing tools for distributed compilation and play testing of the Metaverse experiences at Improbable. And his work saved Improbable, which is a game studio, about 100,000 hours of development time. So, he's been at this, I think, way before Metaverse, the Metaverse sort of term was made popular by Facebook that changed its name to Meta. So Little Atlas, just to give you again a bit of an intro, is a company that can be described as an experiment into using a world map as a social space, right? So to help Web3 natives and communities with local discovery, right? So the basic idea there is just say, you've got a world map and you want to have these Web3 natives come together, connect together, and sort of discover what's happening around them. So basically, you can look at it as a social network on a virtual map of the world, right? And so together with Little Atlas, Nick and his team have been sort of adding on to their portfolio. And one of the things that they recently launched is a product called Degen Events. So Degens are Web3 natives. I think Nick can kind of talk a bit more about them. They're called degenerates. So Degen Events, and this is the first Web3 native local event platform that helps anyone in the Web3 community find local communities and things to do in their city. So I have known Nick for about 5 years now. So we met in school. Somewhere we were in the same class doing an assignment. I remember for some course we were doing during graduate school, and I really do believe he's the reason why we aced that assignment. So thank you, Nick, for that one. So absolutely, super smart guy, all-around great guy, and we're happy to have you with us. So thanks, Nick, for making the time, and welcome. Over to you.
Oh, what an amazing intro, and yeah, thank you so much, Nick. or Loki. I think they call you Loki, right? Wonderful. Well, yeah, really excited to give this talk. I'm hoping it's going to be casual, fun, engaging. I'm hoping, there's some interesting questions at the end of it as well. Loki, you've given like a great intro to me and everything that we do. So I don't know, I guess let's just dive in. I'm going to share my screen. Let me get my desktop up. Perfect. Can everyone see the front slide?
I can.
Incredible. All right, cool. So yeah, let's talk about the next frontier. My name is Nick, as you've already heard in the intro, CEO, co-founder and CEO of Little Atlas. At Little Atlas, we're trying to build basically the in-person community layer for Web3. We think Web3 is a really exciting space. Me and my co-founder, we're really interested in the aspect of how it could change the way we socialize and form communities and organize ourselves. Maybe in ways better than the metaverse, maybe in ways that are comparable in the quality of experiences that you could have, or even better. But really, this talk is about Web3 as a whole. As I understand, a lot of the people tuning in, this might be the first time you've heard about Web3, or you might have checked out Web3, but you don't know much about it. And really, the goal of this talk is I want to explain to you, what is this thing? What is Web3? Why do we need Web3? What is Web 1 and Web 2? Why do we have these crazy terms for things? But then why is Web 3 important as well? What are the reasons why people are getting so excited about it? And if I can convince you of those first 2 points, which is my goal for the talk, maybe I can tell you a little bit about how you can participate in the space. Whether that is as an enthusiast, or whether the companies you work in can get involved in the space somehow as well. So really excited for this opportunity. Let's just dive in. If you have any questions, of course, just throw them in the Q&A feature, and we're going to go through all of them. So I'll tell you a little bit more about me. Loki kind of introduced me already, but maybe I can give some more context. So I've been writing software for over 10 years now. I learned how to code when I was 15. I'm 28 now. I wouldn't say I was properly writing software at the very beginning, but it all really started when I went to uni. So I had the opportunity to attend over 40 hackathons where I was building random side projects. And that landed me a few interesting opportunities. Like I worked at GitHub as an education intern, building some stuff on top of Electron to help basically schools adopt GitHub as a software to help education. I also worked at Amazon as an intern as well. Over there, I was dealing with some really interesting big data problems related to their retail catalog. That got me, fully stuck into software. I think the kind of practical applications of how software can change our lives was always really exciting to me. So I joined Improbable full time in 2017, right after uni. Improbable saw itself as a metaverse company before this became a well-known term. So actually at Improbable internally, we would call it the multiverse rather than the metaverse. And as Loki pointed out, the kind of evolved term that the industry adopted was metaverse. And really the idea is, you create games that become so important and so big and so high fidelity that people would actually start seeing them as more than just a game. Maybe it's a place where you can be a creative and make some money. Maybe it's a place where you can build your own stories and actually earn a living. And this is a problem space that got me really excited, which is why I joined the company. And I had the opportunity to contribute some interesting things whilst I was there. Towards the end of working in Improbable, I was started as a software engineer, but then I moved into product management. And I was building tools for actually testing massive metaverse experiences, both smaller games and these kind of larger games that they've built, which supported 10,000 plus players. I decided to quit as I was following the Web3 space, and it's a space I've been following for a while, but never went too deep on it until 2020 around lockdown time. This is when the next big kind of crypto financial wave took off. Bitcoin gained a lot of value, gains a lot of traction, all of the other coins and technologies as well. And as I was following it, I realized, this is an exciting opportunity. Finally, we're starting to understand enough about what this technology can do to make some really interesting use cases. So I left Improbable in 2021 around October, and found my co-founder Victoria, and we just started jamming on a couple of ideas, which turned into Little Atlas. And I can talk maybe a bit more about that at the end, but let's just kind of dive into the Web3 stuff. So here's an example of kind of, if you want like Web3 in one picture, this is an example of something that my old company Improbable worked on, which is kind of a proto metaverse. As you can see here, you've got this like massive player, which is, like whatever, 10, 12 feet tall. And then you've got like about 1,000 people who are just individual players playing this game, all interacting socially. This is kind of one example of what a metaverse could look like. But this is Little Atlas. This is what we're working on. We're basically approaching socializing in Web3 from a different angle. So rather than piling a bunch of people into a game and letting them show off their NFTs, we actually think it would be cool to project the world of Web3 onto the physical world. So this is a screenshot from Degen Events, which is our platform, which basically aggregates all of the Web3 events happening around the world. So if you're someone just getting started in the space, one of the best ways to meet people is through just an in-person event. Maybe that's an art gallery showing NFTs. Maybe it's a discussion group, talking about a specific topic, like for example, DeSci, which is decentralized science. Or maybe it's just going for drinks with some people in this space. So we're trying to collate all this information into one platform, and we have a bigger vision around it where we want to actually have communities that collaborate in physical spaces and maybe even make partnerships with businesses to create social spaces for these communities. So that's Little Atlas. Let's just dive right in and talk a bit about Web3 and what it is. So Web3, the reason there's a 3 at the end is because there was actually a Web 1 and a Web 2. And now Web3 is sort of the new version of the internet that's trying to solve some of the problems of the previous version. And if you actually look at history, Web 2 was also a reaction to Web 1 and some of the problems that it had. So we sort of just keep building new layers of the internet as society discovers some of the fundamental issues with the previous layers. So the way I describe Web3, and I think a lot of other people in this space, is the ability to own things on the internet. So with Web 1, you could read. Web 2, you could read and write. And with Web 3, users can read, write, and own things on the internet. So many of you will know or will remember Web 1. This was kind of the early version of the internet that started off with the World Wide Web. And this allowed people to, rather than just using their computer to edit documents and kind of do business work, you can now use your computer to run a server, and the server could host content. And so some of the early examples were, celebrities creating their own little kind of wacky websites like the one on the right. And then there would be websites that would aggregate this content, like Yahoo. And this was, before potentially before Google, right? You just had these portals. Rather than being able to search for any information based on the text query, you would organize all of the websites in this massive hierarchy called a portal. And there were many of these portals. Many of them were kind of specific to a country, maybe. So in Russia, we had one called Yandex, which later turned into a search engine. But this was the internet. If you wanted to share information with other people, you had to run your own server. But as a user of the internet, you had access to all of this amazing information worldwide. So everyone could read, but few could write, because running your own server is difficult. So most people, especially people who aren't technically minded, they wouldn't be able to run their own website because they don't know how to run a server and put it in their room somewhere connected to the internet. All of this stuff is quite complicated. So this was one of the big problems with Web 1. Also, monetization was really, really difficult. Like, you could put ads on your page, but those ads wouldn't really be relevant to the users that were visiting your page. It was very difficult to find ads that were actually relevant. So like selling people things they want to buy. So people hated ads, which actually meant monetizing your website was difficult, which meant you couldn't really like spend a lot of time on a website to create interesting content because no one would pay for it. And this kind of static user experience, right? Like web pages were basically just documents online. There wasn't really any interactivity. All of this changed with, in fact, before we go into that, this is an example of, how you would be able to run your own server in Web 1. Like you would basically get hosting from a provider, and then you would have to learn about all these things like, whatever SSH is, Perl, like just look at all of these things on this site. Like most people would not be able to understand how to turn this into a website. There were some interesting tools available like WordPress, which I think is pretty big still, but for the most part, it was just impossible to get started as a content creator. So this is where Web 2 comes in. So Web 2 was the beginning of, the interactive internet, and it allowed you to read and write. So Web 2 is basically where we are today. You have a couple of big players who are creating these social platforms that let you not only consume content, but also publish content. And one of the big value unlocks is that they also let you monetize this content by owning the experience of how you consume it. So, if you download the TikTok app or if you download the YouTube app, you're watching videos, but you're also watching ads. And these ads are highly relevant to you because these portals, learn a lot of information about you. And so they can serve you ads that you might actually be interested in and enjoy. And so this created a crazy cultural revolution on the internet, where we now have so much content, and everyone is producing content, everyone's consuming content. Being a content creator is one of the top kind of aspirations of the Gen Z demographic. They want to actually contribute and not just consume. And that's really interesting. And I think that's a direct consequence of the innovations of Web 2. But Web 2, Web 2, has unlocked a lot of value. So anyone in the world can read and write contents that is accessible worldwide. This is actually really exciting. And in this case, worldwide is 5 billion out of the 7.7 we have, so 64%. That's pretty incredible. But there is a problem, and this problem is centralization. Really, because you don't want to run your own server, there are now companies that do it for you, but as a result, they're basically collecting a ton of data about you. And they can now control the world using it. So they can influence a lot of what happens in our world through having these monopolies on your data. And I don't really see these companies as evil. A lot of people will say, Facebook is evil, Google is evil, even though their tagline is "Don't be evil." I just think they have misaligned incentives. I think a lot of these companies started with good intentions, but now they're getting a lot of criticism because of the kind of power status that they've attained. And I just want to explain this to you guys. So this is what aligned incentives looks like, right? So this is the kind of incentives you would expect from a local business, for example. You are the customer of the business, and your product is whatever the business provides for you. And so it's in their best interest to give you the best product because they want you to be their long-standing customer. Now, this is really not the case with a lot of the big giants in Web 2 today, especially in social media. You are actually the product, and the customer is the advertiser, because the way that everyone makes money in this case is if advertisers are happy. So instead, what happens is, you are getting this kind of social media experience from one of these apps, and in exchange, you're giving your data to the company. So you're building up your profile. You're giving them your preferences, so who you're following, the posts that you're liking, but you're giving them even deeper data. They collect your location data. They collect, very, very fine-grained metrics on how you use some of these apps. So, for example, the rate at which you're scrolling, when you're using these apps, and a lot of this, even which part of the screen you're typing on, and they can learn a lot about you, and you might not even realize. And this data means that you can now be served this kind of AI curated content, which optimizes your engagement in the app. And this is what these giants care the most about. They want you to be as engaged as possible. So they want you to be spending hours a day on these apps, rather than the amount of time that is actually useful to you. So what they end up doing is kind of hacking your brain and your dopamine system in order to serve you the kind of content that would make you keep watching. And with this content, they're serving you targeted ads. And then in this case, the customer is happy because advertisers get great engagement on their ads. So actually, from a startup founder's perspective, using Facebook ads is great because you can reach a very relevant audience based on this information they gather from you. So in fact, one book that a lot of people read when they build B2C businesses, so customer-facing businesses, is this book called Hooked, which literally teaches you how to form habit-forming products. So this is now sort of an industry-wide phenomenon where we're trying to build products that are engaging. And this might be kind of contributing to one of the problems in Web 2 of this kind of idea of centralization and data monopolies. So let's talk a bit about Web 3, and I'll touch a bit later about how it solves these problems. So what is all this crypto, blockchain, and Web 3 stuff? To many of you, it might look like this. So, you might open your browser, look up crypto, see a bunch of this stuff and think, what is this? You have different words. You have hodl. Most people don't know what hodl is. You have these charts. Most of us aren't trading. And then you have these monkeys, which you don't really understand. So really understanding crypto is partly understanding the technology, but also understanding the culture. So hopefully I can explain some of these things in the next 15 minutes or so. So the most, if you learn one thing from this talk, the most interesting thing about Web3 is internet native scarce assets. So whereas in Web2 we talk about information and access to information. So if you think about recommendation engine's job is to give you information that is the most relevant to you. The way we speak about the internet today is information. Web3 is all about scarce assets. So it's all about owning things online, being able to prove to the world that you own something that is scarce, that is entirely online and isn't owned by some kind of central entity. So the difference is that you can be playing games on Steam, for example, or on Xbox and earning achievements, and these things could be seen as like scarce things. But if Microsoft servers go down or Facebook servers go down, those assets also go down. But the idea of Web3 scarce assets is that they don't go down. They remain on the internet forever and you own them forever. So that's probably like the most important point. And I'll base almost everything else I say on this point. Let's talk about a brief history. I'll give you a brief history of Web3 and how all of this came to be. So it all started with the 2008 global financial crisis, where I think a lot of people, especially in the tech scene, realized that banks are a big single point of failure, and the governments that bail out those banks, they're also a point of failure. We build trust in this financial system, but in a similar way, because it's a centralized system, they're able to when they fail, everything else fails. So it's sort of a domino effect of a few bad decisions get made in one place that's responsible for many assets, and you end up with this big collapse. And the solution to that was Bitcoin. In fact, Bitcoin, we know that Bitcoin was created as a direct result of the 2008 crash, because one of the first published records on chain was a quote from a newspaper that was reporting on the consequences of that crash. So but what Bitcoin is basically money that doesn't change. It's essentially just it's sort of like cash. If you get a 10-pound note or a $10 note, you're kind of confident that it's there in your hands. No one can take it away from you unless you give it to someone. And the difference with banking is you have a lot of control there, like a lot of very complicated kind of financial protocols that most people don't understand, that evolve. Governments are able to print money, right? And all of this changes money. And Bitcoin is money that doesn't change, so that we can put more trust in it. The cool thing about it is nobody controls it. This is what we call decentralization. There's no company running Bitcoin. There's actually tens of thousands of people around the world that run Bitcoin, and they all cooperate with each other. And the software that runs Bitcoin ensures decentralization, because anyone can contribute to running it. Anyone can also participate. So this is done through cryptography. So anyone can generate their own wallet. Wallets aren't something that you use an API for, or you have to log into a website for. You can just generate a wallet through a piece of software that you can run locally on your computer, and that gives you a bank account. So no one can deny you a bank account in Bitcoin. And yeah, as I said, anyone can help run it. So people who are calling themselves miners are running the software that powers this network. So what is blockchain? Blockchain is sort of the fundamental technology behind Bitcoin. And really the simplest way of explaining it is it's an open database that no single entity operates. So imagine an Excel spreadsheet that anyone can write to. So one way I like to explain it is, or I explain Bitcoin and decentralization and blockchain, is through something that all of you most likely can already understand, which is these long-standing games that we have, like chess and football or soccer, depending where you're from. So with chess, you can walk up to a park, see a bunch of people playing chess, and you can play chess with someone without anyone having to watch over you and make sure you're making the correct moves or playing the game by the rules. Because all of us who play chess understand the rules of chess. We can play chess without any kind of central company telling us whether we're playing the game correctly, just because the rules are simple enough. It's the same with football. You can go outside and play a game of football with someone you've never met. And because the rules are simple, you can play it in a sort of decentralized way. So both of you can play, and if any of you break the rules, you can call each other out on it. And this is what you call consensus. So, if someone cheats in chess or if someone cheats in football, it's in our best interests, everyone who's watching, everyone who's spectating, everyone else who's playing, to say, no, that was wrong. And the way that we decide whether someone cheated or not is through group consensus. And that's basically how Bitcoin works as well, just like on a slightly more technical level. So users trade Bitcoin by submitting transactions, and they sign these transactions with their kind of cryptographic key, which means that they can prove that they made a transaction and that no one else can tamper with it. Miners make sure that transactions follow certain rules, and really the simplest rule is that you can't spend more than you have. And that's basically one of the only rules in Bitcoin is you should never be able to double spend your money. And a blockchain is basically an open database that anyone can add transactions to, and it stores basically who owns what, which is derived from all the transactions, all the different wallets made. And the next evolution of Bitcoin is Ethereum. And so Bitcoin is money that doesn't change, and Ethereum is a global computer where anyone can run programs. Let's talk a bit more about Ethereum and smart contracts. So Ethereum was created by Vitalik Buterin, who's actually a really young guy. I think he's roughly my age, maybe 27, but he came up with this idea whilst being an early contributor to Bitcoin. So he contributed by writing. He ran a blog that was discussing Bitcoin and all of the kind of the revolution that this technology can bring. And back in 2014, he invented Ethereum, which is sort of an evolution on Bitcoin, where instead of storing financial transactions on chain, you are storing programs and their execution on chain. So still uses blockchain, but by changing what kind of data is stored, you can now have a decentralized computer. So Ethereum is basically, imagine a computer where there's only one instance. So one computer that we all share. So its hard drive is basically one global hard drive that can store a bunch of programs and a bunch of accounts or other data. And it runs open source programs that are actually computed together by thousands of miners. So similar to Bitcoin, it's completely decentralized, which means that you can trust it. No single entity can bring down Ethereum. You would actually need to bring down all the different miners around the world for Ethereum to stop running, which is actually really exciting because it means that any data that you put on this computer or any programs that you put on this computer, you can just assume that they're going to live forever. So you can build a lot more trust in them. And these programs are called smart contracts. So the innovation that Ethereum unlocked is that even though the computer doesn't change, so the computer stays the same, anyone can create new decentralized programs without writing their own blockchain. Like blockchains are really complicated. I can maybe, if I spend, maybe a couple of months or a couple of weeks, I could recreate the Bitcoin blockchain, but it's very, very difficult. You have to understand a lot of things to create your own blockchain. So there's a big barrier to entry to creating new value in this space. But if you have a computer that is secured by the blockchain and is kind of provably decentralized and everyone trusts, anyone can just write programs for it. And these programs just inherently are also decentralized and can also be trusted. So that's the amazing thing about Ethereum. I think it's actually a much more exciting technology than Bitcoin. So here are the innovations themselves. NFTs, which are essentially just things online in the most basic sense. But a lot of the use cases for NFTs are digital art. So being able to, as a digital artist, create a piece of work, which isn't a physical piece of work, but a digital piece of work, and put this work on chain, and someone, a patron, can buy it and feel like they own the only copy, which is actually really cool because the art world survives through patronage. So as an artist, as a physical artist, the way you make money is by creating pieces of art and selling them to patrons who then put them in galleries or put them in their house. But this is how a lot of artists make a living. That's what makes them kind of encourages them to produce more art. And for the longest time, artists were limited to producing physical works. when it comes to visual art, but now artists can actually do digital art and still find patrons and sell their work. And what makes this possible is the scarcity that NFTs provide. A special type of NFT is what we call the profile picture, and this is what you see on the left with the Bored Apes. This is kind of an example of a piece of artwork where you can make, rather than making just one copy of it, you make tens of thousands of variations, and then a bunch of people can own these artworks and sort of form a community on the basis of that, because all of them own one of these NFTs. They're all kind of tied together by the idea that they have these NFTs. So it sort of starts to create this idea of a social graph that bridges together all of the people who collect the same NFTs. DeFi is another thing. So the idea of decentralized finance, you can actually create tokens on top of Ethereum, which sort of represent like, basically creating your own digital currency. So and there's many interesting applications on top of creating these digital currencies, where you can actually create decentralized protocols that run on this open computer and never change, that let you do things like trade the currencies from one to the other. So there's a company called Uniswap that does that. You can also borrow money based on collateral that you have in another currency. So I can own a lot of Ethereum, and then based on the fact that I own this Ethereum, I can borrow some other token. And all of this is managed entirely using code. It's completely transparent. So before running one of these protocols or interacting with them, you can see the code that runs it. You can verify that it works according to rules that you're comfortable with. So this is very different to traditional finance institutions, which are, a black box. Like you put your money in, they give you some kind of interest rate, and this interest rate changes. You don't know why. You can't really pop the hood and see how these institutions operate. So when they fail, all of us are surprised. But with DeFi, you can kind of predict their failure upfront by looking at the code. And of course, the idea of the metaverse, which is kind of building on top of these ideas, and creating games where all of the objects inside of those games are user generated. So you can actually log into a game with thousands of other people and create your own stories by creating your own objects in there, role playing, and all of these things can be sold, bought and sold as NFTs. So you actually have games with with economies within them. Where players can trade assets, and then if they want to, they can take assets from one metaverse that they've created, sell them for real money, and then buy assets in another metaverse. So it actually allows us to kind of generate value within games, which is really, really exciting. So oh well, actually I have more slides on this, right? Yeah, so I've talked about DeFi and tokens and financial apps like Uniswap. So I'll just skip this slide. Maybe I'll touch a little bit more on this idea of an open social graph. So a lot of these NFTs that you collect, they basically define little parts of your identity. So for example, if you own this NFT, which you can see on the kind of right-hand side here, CryptoPunks, this was one of the first NFTs ever released. And the people who buy these are, right now they're quite expensive, actually. I think they're like 100,000 to buy one of these. So it's sort of defining your like Rolex club. All of the people who can afford a premium NFT are all creating this sort of exclusive community where they can, throw these lavish parties or whatever. I don't think this is the end goal for NFTs, just to create these elitist clubs, but I think this is where we are right now. One example of another NFT is World of Women, which is here on the right. This is sort of like I guess like a feminist NFT or a proto-feminist NFT, which is, kind of recognizing the fact that, just like in general in tech, there's very few women in the Web3 world, and this is a problem. So creating an NFT like this allows women who are in this space to collect together and, kind of like form their own community, which is like really exciting. And these communities operate on Discord. So Discord is this sort of Web2 social app. I don't know, you guys might know about it, but it's basically sort of like an IRC chat room, but slightly better. One of the things that it lets you do through plugins is have private access to certain channels based on the NFTs that you hold. So you can actually plug in your wallet and verify that you are a holder of an NFT. And now you have this shared chat group with all of the people who hold that NFT. So essentially, it lets you use these NFTs as access passes to private chat channels where your community can have discussions. So the cool thing about this is that by tracking, the ownership of these NFTs on the blockchain. So you have like wallets and you have the NFTs that they own. You actually start seeing this open social graph that's connecting all of these wallets together. And the interesting thing about it is that any apps on top of the social graph to view this data in different ways. So this is sort of an interesting departure from the world where Facebook owns all of your data, and if you want developer access, good luck. Like you don't even really get to. It's very difficult to integrate with a social graph because they want to protect your data so that they can monetize it, so to make the advertisers happy. But here we are in Web3, where you have this open social graph that anyone can create new value on top of. So this is a really kind of exciting point. And this is an example of a metaverse. So this is Decentraland, and this is actually a virtual fashion show in Decentraland. So you can see all of these different characters. They're wearing different clothes. There's actually a big growing movement of metaverse fashion where you can spend a long time kind of creating a really extravagant piece of clothing that isn't present in the real world, but is a 3D model that your character can wear. So metaverse is sort of this loose idea of being able to express yourself in the virtual world much more deeply. And another really exciting thing are DAOs. So DAOs are sort of like internet native companies. So unlike a traditional company, which incorporates itself somewhere and builds this sort of fairly rigid hierarchy to achieve some kind of goal, a DAO is sort of this new idea where if you give people if you unite people under a shared goal, which might be to raise some money for Ukraine, right, the crisis that's happening there, or it might be to send some people on the moon. If you get enough people excited and then mince a token, which all of these people who are interested can hold, you can then create initiatives where everyone can contribute. And one example here is Ukraine DAO, which raised 3 million for the Ukrainian army. And this is just a bunch of people who were upset at what's happening in the world politically, and they wanted to help in some way that they can. And so they joined together and donated money, which was then sent to Ukraine. And I think in exchange they got some NFTs and some digital artworks that they bought in exchange for those donations. So they get to keep those NFTs as sort of a memorabilia showing that they've contributed to this movement. But like raising 3 million is pretty crazy, actually. The fact that this was crowdfunded around the world, and anyone can start one of these ideas and share them on Twitter, and suddenly you've actually just amassed a lot of capital that can create a substantial contribution to a real problem. And MoonDAO is another great example. So this is a project that I was following since the start of the year. They basically collected a bunch of people who are interested in sort of space exploration or space, and released a token. A bunch of people bought it, which gave them a lot of capital. And they've actually secured a contract to pick 2 of the random members in that DAO to go into space on Blue Origin. And what makes this really exciting is that most of us don't have the opportunity to pay. I don't know how much it costs, but I imagine it's in the order of hundreds of thousands or millions to go into space. And so this is something that's usually restricted to the ultra rich. But now you can contribute to this kind of raffle where a bunch of space enthusiasts get to donate the money to support this mission, and then 2 random people get to go into space. So this is DAOs, basically internet native decentralized companies. And yeah, of course, I think one of the most important things is the digital art renaissance. So I was talking about this slightly earlier, but NFTs enable digital artists to finally make enough money so that they're able to produce more complex, more interesting, and more engaging digital art. This is one example from a guy called Augie, who I met in London. And I wanted to share his story because I think it's highly interesting. So this guy spent a couple of months painting in VR for 20 hours a day. And if you think about that, 20 hours a day, like that's, you're sleeping very little. You're just doing this and nothing else for 5 months to create this piece. And you should check it. You should write this down and actually check it out. Because it's this amazing 8-minute long 3D render, which was 800 gigabytes of data, all painted in VR. And it's just one of the most incredible pieces of digital art I've ever seen. And I was just thinking, would this be possible when you have no way to monetize it? Because this guy spent a couple of months working on this piece, and he ended up raising around like £50,000, like $70,000 from it. So this is able to support him for the next year whilst he works on the next piece, which I think is something that's really exciting about how NFTs can be applied to digital art. You can actually create better art that gets taken more seriously because you're actually now able to monetize it, just like with physical visual art. So that was kind of a brief overview of some of the things that I'm excited about in Web3. So as a summary, I think really the most important thing here is creating a world where we have slightly better aligned incentives between the users of the internet, the creators of the content, and the people running companies that create new value on the blockchain. And looking at the kind of Web2 social model that I showed you earlier, this is how Web3 sort of tries to improve on it. So you as the individual can own your assets, own your data, and use these decentralized apps. And all of these are secure. All of this value is secured by blockchains and the operators of those blockchains, which are able to provide global authenticity and security of your assets and data. So as a result, you can actually invest in the companies by minting tokens. And as a user, you're not just a user, you're an owner of the platforms that you use. Whether those platforms are kind of social movements like NFTs, maybe movements that have some sort of purpose like Daos, or even the startups that you use, like potentially in DeFi, where you can also own their tokens. So essentially anyone can now own essentially equity in everything that they use without having to go through a bunch of legal loopholes and like understanding how to invest into startups and all of this stuff. Just like you have ownership on the internet as a first-class member, which is really exciting. I mean, companies also benefit because they can create apps on top of this rich ecosystem of open source programs and open data that lives on these blockchains. Like if I want to create my own startup, I don't have to necessarily build my own network effects, invite enough users for it to make sense for me to then land social features. I can just base my startup on top of the existing open social graph that's on chain. And maybe if I'm building a DeFi startup, I can build my stuff on top of existing DeFi protocols because everything by default has API access. So what we hope as a space is that we create deeper incentives or better aligned incentives between users of products and the companies building them as a result of these technologies. So, I don't want to just focus on the good parts. I think Web3 has a lot of problems as well. And I think solving these problems is probably some of the most important value add that we can do right now in this space as builders. Usability is probably the biggest problem. Right now, Web3 isn't very usable. In order to even get involved in the space, you have to create your own wallet, understand how to secure your own wallet, write down this kind of complicated passphrase that you have to store somewhere safe so that no one can steal all of your funds. And even the apps that you use, that they're fairly difficult to understand for the most part. So it's very much early days. But usability is something that I'm personally aware of a lot of startups that are working on improving this aspect. Scale and efficiency is another big problem. You might have seen online, there's a lot of news articles about how inefficient Bitcoin and Ethereum are. The amounts of energy that they use to ensure this kind of decentralization and security is on the scale of many countries. So it's very difficult to imagine the current state of the technology scaling worldwide because we just wouldn't have enough energy to power it. But scaling and efficiency is probably the most talked about topic in this space. And there's a lot of new companies that are building more efficient blockchains using technologies like proof of stake and layer 2, which make blockchains much more scalable. So no one's going to use Ethereum until you can submit transactions that cost you cents instead of dollars. Because right now there's this big kind of because there's so few transactions that can be processed at any given moment. The cost to use these systems is very, very high. And privacy is another important problem. Like one of the problems right now with Web3 is, if you're publishing information on chain, it's by default public to everyone. So anyone else can read this information. So, the current solution is that you create these pseudo-anonymous identities where, you have your wallet, but you would never, associate your real name or your real address or, things like that with that wallet. Like, you're very careful about it because this information now exists forever on chain. And any transactions that you make is now tied to this identity. So a lot of blockchain users, they choose to keep their wallet private and not to share it with people because this lets them maintain some kind of level of privacy. But I think really in the future, we need to think about solutions for how we can store data in a decentralized way, but still in a way that gives you access control. So you can choose who you share this data with. There's some interesting startups that are working on this problem right now. One example is Disco, disco.xyz. Which let you keep a lot of your data kind of privately on your computer and then choose to share it with websites. So that's a potential solution there. So the final part to this, let's see, maybe I have a couple of minutes to go through this, is how can you participate? So if you're excited about Web3, how can you get started? So here's one slide on basically what I would do if I was just getting into the space right now. And by the way, nothing in this talk is financial advice. So please don't do this because I told you. Use your own brain. Make sure you read up on this stuff before you dive in, because you can lose a lot of money. You could potentially get hacked. So just make sure you read around before you do any of these things. But to get started, really the best thing to do is go download MetaMask, which is this thing on the left, and set up a wallet in your web browser. There's a Chrome extension that lets you do it. You can use a web service like Coinbase to buy some Ethereum or Solana or any other coins, and then you can transfer, for example, Ethereum to MetaMask, and then you can start using apps like OpenSea, which lets you buy and sell NFTs. You can use Uniswap to trade some of your Ethereum into another coin, and just play around, look around at what kind of decentralized apps there are, and see if anything seems interesting to you. And for maybe $10 or $20, maybe these days like $20 or $30, you can have some fun and just try out a couple of these apps. And that's really the way to get started in this space, is just get through that barrier of having your own wallet and playing around with some of this technology. Because ever since I've done that, I got so excited in this space that now I'm building my own startup in it. So it's definitely super exciting, and you can have this kind of childish fascination with some of the stuff that's happening in the space. So yeah, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this talk. If you want to find me, I spend most of my time on Twitter, which is sort of what the Web3 space uses to network. So you can find me. I am NF Tikhonov. And if you follow me on there, I sometimes post about the space in my commentary on it. And there's some more kind of interesting information about what we're doing at Little Atlas as well, if you're interested in following us. If you have any questions that I can't answer today, feel free to write me an email. I'm nick@littleatlas.xyz. And yeah, once again, really appreciate the opportunity, and I'd love to answer some of your questions.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Nick. Really amazing, detailed, and clear intro into the world of Web3. So really appreciate that. And of course, I love the disclaimer there at the end, so this is not financial advice. And that is important because, you might get some people riled up and people sort of ready to spend their hard-earned money. So I think one of the things I really appreciated also in your talk, Nick, is that you not only talked about the evolution and what's happening, so evolution from Web 1 to 3, and also what's happening in Web3, but also, talked about some of the problems, right? So, and I love that you brought that up. I think this week I watched, I think it was on CNBC or Bloomberg, one of those sort of financial channels, and I noted Solana just recently launched a phone, right? Which I think they said what they're trying to solve for is just the whole idea of bringing the concept of Web3. So yeah, not just a phone, but so again, for context, Solana is a cryptocurrency. And so this is a cryptocurrency company that's launching a Web3 phone right? And in essence, what they were saying is they want to try and sort of bridge that gap, right? So bring in the usability aspect into the mix, right? So kind of bring it home, put it in the hands of everyday users, and kind of get them using Web3 even at this stage. So I found that quite interesting. You actually brought that up. So now just to jump real quick into the questions, we don't have a lot of time, but I just wanted to start with the first question. I think someone asked about a question around the metaverse and how is it different from Roblox? Roblox? Yeah, Roblox, sorry, Roblox, right? So, basically the idea that on Roblox, I can come in, I can create an avatar, create items, fight with other races, walk aimlessly in this virtual world for long periods of time. So I mean, is a metaverse a game? Is it more than a game? Like in your view, like what's
I mean, honestly, with any kind of label that anyone creates, the longer, I think that there's sort of some social consensus that has to happen when we define like very clearly what something is and isn't. And I think this is something that, with Web3 and with the metaverse, it's something that we're still going through that definition phase where before we know exactly what it is and can characterize it, everyone has different definitions. My definition is a metaverse is, rather than being one experience, it is a platform for experiences that the players can create. Creator economy and an internal and I think Minecraft is probably one of the early examples of metaverse, because Minecraft is just a game where you have this open land and anyone can build, and there's or mine or crafts or whatever. I think Roblox is another example of metaverse group as well. I think kind of which is on Rails feels a lot less like a metaverse because the players aren't part of the story. And I think there's games that tell you a very specific story, like all these like on Rails kind of shooter games that have story mode. And those might be multiplayer, but they're very specific, right? They're telling you one specific story. And metaverse is something where the players can tell stories, and these stories evolve, and the game itself evolves as different players take part. And I think having games where your actions have a lot of consequence are more land into kind of the metaverse bucket. I'd definitely say Roblox is one of them.
All right, great, thanks. So next question, I'm going to try and combine two, but basically it's the sort of question here is around the idea of what risks exist within this space, yeah, right? So yeah. We've seen scams around Bitcoin, around different coins. I think there was this lady who was the crypto queen's scammer queen, something like that. So just generally, I mean, just beyond what we've seen. What are the obvious risks? What are the sort of hidden risks? What else can you tell us about that?
I think the biggest risk is we're putting a lot of trust in blockchains as a platform. So any asset that you create on top of Ethereum, its security, its safety, its kind of immutability and relevance for eternity, right? Depends on Ethereum being bug-free. So the problem with blockchain software is that by definition it has to be it's very difficult to upgrade it. So you have these blockchains that have been around for 5 years, and like so far, is it 5 years? Yeah, well, yeah, like 6 or 7 years, right? So far they haven't been hacked. But if someone were to find a way to hack it, this might actually invalidate all of the assets that are on the platform. So the reason why everyone in the space says it's a risky space, so like don't go investing your all of your life savings into these tokens, because if some person who's like going to be obviously a genius finds a hack which lets you destabilize the whole Ethereum network or Solana or even Bitcoin, you will have the potential to lose all of your money because suddenly everyone's going to be selling all of these assets and there will be no buyers. So one of the reasons why I am actually personally bullish on Bitcoin is because Bitcoin has been around since 2008. Sorry, 20. I think it was like 2008, 2009, maybe, and it hasn't changed since. So none of the forks that have happened where someone tried to upgrade it in some way, none of them really succeeded compared to the original. And the reason why I think this is important is because hackers have had over a decade now to try to break the system, and they couldn't. And the system is very, very simple, like defined in very simple terms as well. So there aren't many places where you could find an exploit. So the longer Bitcoin survives without being hacked, the more trust people will put into it. And any new blockchain coming on the space, even though it could show you crazy improvements in efficiency and things like that, they would also have to go through this trial of being relevant for a decade before people really put trust into it. So I think that's one of the biggest risks.
All right, great, thanks. So next question. So I know the technology is still evolving. I know, even not just the technology, but even terminology is evolving, use cases are evolving, etc. And I've seen that, also together with that, just the idea of adding legitimacy to the space is an important thing, right? So, so we saw this when Elon Musk, at some point, I think Tesla bought a bunch of Bitcoin, and that kind of added a bit of legitimacy. Facebook changed their name to Meta and said, you know what, we're investing big time into this space. So I just wanted to ask, so in your experience, I know you guys are doing your own startup right now. How hard is it to kind of bring people, because I've noticed your, the products that I've seen that you are working on right now are more targeted towards the degens, right? So the people in the community, but then how easy, how hard is it to kind of bridge that gap, right? Between the sort of like the virtual world, and the physical world and this world of Web3. So I don't know what challenges you're experiencing there and how you're thinking around that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think this space is sort of working together to grow its audience. I think one of the biggest problems right now is onboarding is very, very complicated. Like most of the user experiences that we have today, they're actually optimized to make onboarding as easy as possible. Like I can go from downloading Uber to getting a taxi in a couple of minutes. I already understand how to use my phone, how apps work, how to use my credit card with Apple Pay, and I don't have this friction to get into the space. I think a lot of people who are interested in Web3 get polarized by this friction. So either they're really passionate about it already or find it really exciting. And so they're willing to go through what I think is like maybe a day or a couple of hours of just getting started and understanding the basics. But you have a lot of these new concepts like wallets and exchanges and coins and tokens and NFTs and all the stuff that I explained. And before you understand them, you don't really see the beauty of the space. And I think there are companies specifically solving the problem of what we call on-ramps. So, this is basically giving you a bridge where you can use a wallet, with a credit card. For example, I know a friend of mine who's actually building a company like this. They're in stealth, but it's sort of exciting tech. Being able to just use a credit card to interact with something like Uniswap without having to go through all of these hoops to get there. From our perspective, we're taking a slightly different approach. So we're building for the existing customer base, the user base in the space. So, the kind of 2 million people who trade on OpenSea, right, or hold NFTs. So that means we actually fairly specific in what kind of products we build. We're building products for a very deep niche. And I think a lot of other startups are doing the same. So rather than everyone trying to bridge the gap into the wider market, we're kind of focusing on building value on top of the blockchain and hoping someone else will solve this problem for us. Although that said, we are looking in ways to make Web3 sort of an add-on to our app. So rather than having to have a wallet to use our features, you can choose to use a wallet, and it makes the experience better. But also, anyone can load degen events. You don't have to have a wallet. You can just see the map. You can go to these meetups and then decide if you want to go through the pain of or this friction to participate. So yeah, I think that kind of covers it.
All right. Thanks so much. And guys, I'm so sorry we've kind of run over time, but we hope, if you don't mind, just give us an extra 5 minutes and we'll just wrap it up. So last couple of questions, Nick, for anyone who's coming to this call, hearing about Web3 for the first time, probably after this is gonna go sit down on their laptop or on their phone and kind of begin exploring that world, and would love to sort of build a community, put a community together. Like in your experience, I mean, you've been in this community for a minute now. What would you tell them? Like what, to build that community, like where should they start, right? Like, and what are the things you've seen sort of working towards sort of building stronger communities in this space?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the best way to learn about this space is by surrounding yourself with a bunch of people who are also learning about this space. That is what I found. That is what me and my co-founder realized very, very quickly. Which made us really excited about, looking at the integration of Web3 into the physical world with like real meetups of degens or Web3 natives. I think, the best bet is if you know there's a local community already, and you can discover one on Twitter. Maybe you can type in some keywords, or of course you can maybe use degen events, although I don't think we have many events in Africa at the moment. But in the future, I really hope we have events worldwide. But I think, yeah, finding a local community, you could just start with a Telegram chat or Facebook chat or whatever with a bunch of people who are your friends who are interested in Web3. And that's how I got into the space. I found a couple of friends and I would just start sharing articles or sharing like news or tweets. Another thing is, in lieu of having a local community, get Twitter. And follow, like you can just go on my Twitter and follow a bunch of people that I follow, because I mostly just follow Web3 people. And that will just kind of get you started, like having this kind of content pipe of everything new happening in this space gets you a claim to it over time. So even though you won't understand everything straight away, like over time, you'll pick up on it. Yeah, there's a really good podcast called Bankless, which I recommend watching. They're on YouTube, they're on Spotify. It's kind of, they explain things in a very good way. I think it's fairly palatable to newcomers into the space as well. So, check that out if you'd like. But yeah, of course, if you need any help or if you have any specific questions, feel free to like write me an email or message me on Twitter as well. Like I'm happy to, I'm most excited about introducing new people into the space. So my inbox is always open. So feel free to reach out and maybe I can connect you with some people as well.
All right, great. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm hoping that after this, the next, I don't know if it's going to be Nairobi or Kenya Web3 community is going to be posting their events on degen events, right? So that's a plug there for Nick, just in case anyone would love to explore one of the products they're building. So to kind of wrap it up, last question, do you own any crypto, and what are your, favorite cryptos?
Oh, that's a great question. So no, I don't own any crypto at the moment. I have a couple of NFTs that aren't like, they're just purely like sentimental. Like I have a, honestly, probably the thing I own that I value the most right now is my Ethereum name. So my ENS name, it's basically a domain name that links to my wallet. I have my last name .eth. So if you look up my last name .eth, you'll find all the other shit that I hold. But yeah, I'm currently focused on investing in my business, and we're bootstrapping right now, and I don't have much capital, so I'm not investing in crypto. I will maybe pick up some things that I'm really passionate about once I have some more disposable income. But in terms of things that I did hold, I think, a lot of the DeFi protocols are really, really interesting. Like, having a look at things like Uniswap and Aave, the blockchains that are competing right now to become kind of the most efficient, most widely used platform, they're always worth looking into, whether or not you're investing or just like interested in. But have a look at Solana, have a look at Polygon. Of course, read about Ethereum. That's probably the most important one right now. And with NFTs, there's just like so many of them. I think you can just go on OpenSea and explore, or maybe go on Twitter and see the kind of projects that people are talking about. But I think it's something very personal. I think, now the space is getting so big that people are actually going into different niches within that space. So anything I'm interested in, most of you might not be interested in. So, along the lines of the kind of areas that I'm covered, like DeFi, Metaverse, NFTs, just have a look around the space and see what tickles your fancy. I think maybe the first step to go for coins is coinmarketcap.com. It's basically the the leaderboard of like all the different cryptocurrencies by how much they're worth. So you can just go down the list and read about each one. And there's like thousands of them, so you'll never run out of things to explore. So that's another way of diving in as well.
All right, great. And I think we'll wrap it up on that note. Thank you so much, Nick, for making the time to take us through Web3. Amazing presentation. And thank you also for your kind answers to our many questions. I think there's definitely so much more in the way of questions, but I guess time kind of doesn't allow for that. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for making time for today's talk. Please feel free to catch the recording for this on YouTube. And looking forward to seeing you next time. I think these events happen, is it once a month, right? So Inquisitive as a series kind of happens once a month. So looking forward to catching you on our next one. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you for the opportunity. Have a good day, guys.
Thanks. Bye.